Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the Price Sell Paint podcast, where we try to help painting contractors price jobs more profitably to grow their business. I'm John.
I'm Michael.
And we're here today to talk about, what are we talking about, Mike?
Yeah, I want to talk about production rate estimating. I'm seeing some confusion. I've always thought this was really clear and obvious. To be honest, I thought it was kind of like the only acceptable answer, but it seems like there's a lot of different views on it. And I would love to just define what production rate estimating is. I think you and I align pretty well on production rate estimating and the benefits of it. But I think there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of really intelligent, successful business owners that have maybe other ways of doing estimating, and I think it would be good to at least just have a clear definition as to what we're talking about.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great thing to start with, and obviously, being powered by PaintScout, production rate estimating is really the foundation of the product, and so I think it's worth talking about. Not only that, but I'm super passionate about this topic myself because, I remember the moment where I actually learned what this was and how it worked, and it honestly changed our business. In so many ways, it gave us such a foundation to actually make money, understand what we were doing, and it was really just it was like a light bulb moment for me to be able to grow a successful business. And so it's something that isn't talked about enough. I think people don't have a clear idea what it is. I think there's a lot more questions than there is answers. So I don't think we can cover it all today, but man, I would love to at least, just kind of uncover a few of the basics and why it brings the benefit that I think both you and I would agree it brings for our businesses. So, so maybe you can start, like, for people listening in, really what is production rate estimating in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, so again, this goes back in my story. When I was in college, I worked for a company called Student Painters, very similar to like a college pro, and ran a small painting business. And when we did that, we had to learn how to price jobs. And so we were literally given a piece of paper that said how long it was supposed to take for something to be painted. And to me, that is kind of like the basic understanding of what production rate estimating is. It's the only thing I've ever known, never done, for over 20 years. So really what it comes down to is how long should it take for an average painter to be able to paint something or something that we can measure. So it might mean one window, or it might mean 100 square feet of siding. But some unit of measure that we can then apply to whatever house or building, whatever it is, to then say, okay, well, if one window takes 1 hour, 10 windows takes 10 hours, and we can kind of go from there, and then we can figure out, okay, if we know how long it's going to take, and we know how much it costs to pay somebody to do that, we can then figure out some of our other costs and apply that as a sales rate to the total number of hours to come up with a price.
Mm-hmm. That sounds pretty straightforward to me. Obviously, I understand this. Is there anything you'd want to explain to somebody who maybe is the first time hearing about it, or has a lot of questions or reservations about this term, production rate estimating? So it sounds pretty scary, I think, when you first time you hear about it.
I think what's intimidating is trying to figure out how long does it take to paint things, right? And I think where a lot of people get stuck is every house is different, and that is true. But we're not looking for perfect. Whenever we hire like a new sales rep, that's one of the biggest things that I need to teach is that this is math. And when we were in middle school, high school, whatever, like going back to math class, there was one correct answer, and it needed to be exact, and you had to show your work. But when we're doing production rate estimating, it's okay if it's not exact. I always like to say we're not cutting wood, we're painting. It's okay if whatever this section of the house is 30 feet wide instead of 28 feet and 4 inches. It's going to be okay. So I think like that's where maybe some of the reservation comes in, is, being intimidated by the idea of like having to be too exact, which you definitely don't need.
Totally.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, estimating for me has always been about it's about good, not perfect. And people might fight me on that a little bit and say like, well, if it's not perfect, how are you do you know your price? And it's like, well, I'm trying to run a business here. Like the goal here is to do hundreds, if not thousands of jobs. And if I'm going for perfect, that takes a level of detail that's going to take me a long, long time. And I think that in this type of scenario, you have to be comfortable with that this is a science and an art, and those two things together are going to result in there being some interpretation that you have to make, some judgment calls. You actually have to estimate some stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, the power of production rate estimating is that you get a baseline of something to work off of in order to know that you're not going to get you're not going to screw over your business at the end of the day, and that you can confidently and effectively price jobs quickly, get prices in the hands of customers, win jobs, and have something at the end of the day to pass along to your crew in order to produce the job properly. So now you've got profit in the mix. And I, personally, I think when I first heard about the term, it scared me because of what you said. Yeah, I don't know how long things exactly take. And two, I'm putting my number, my estimate, my price in the hands of math. And that sometimes feels like it's out of your control. But it took a while to realize that it's actually more in my control, right? Those numbers you can change, you can work with them. And there's huge benefits to that, to having that baseline to work off of. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm agreeing with you. Am I agreeing with you?
I think
Yes.
so. Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
think the 2 points that you made that I want to highlight is, quickly, and that like so in my mind, it's like we want to make the production rates allow me to do things quickly, but if I try to get to the point of like 100% perfect and, no art, right? So go back to the other point you made of art and science. I think like what production rate is doing is trying to get rid of as much of the art as possible.
Hmm.
And I feel like that's maybe where the conversation or the debate can come in, is we're not saying you're going to get rid of 100% of that art. I'm not saying that, and I don't think you are. There is some of that, and at some point, like, it does take some training or experience or otherwise to be able to do that. But the more I can eliminate that, the more I can scale my business, because it doesn't involve years and years and years of training and experience. Where, let's say again, if it was 80% art form, like, that takes a long time to see so many different houses and so many different substrates, versus maybe if I can hold for 10 or 15% of the whole quote is going to be based on art, if you will, to use your words, of just like some of that experience and a little bit of that like guesstimating based on previous knowledge.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, we want to be able to get the quote out quick. Like, again, like, this is not meant to be a like calculus class. It's meant to be like, again, using good software, certainly PaintScout, and there's other good software out there that is based on production rate estimating, allows us to do this in a relatively efficient manner. I mean, we're talking minutes, or 10, 20 minutes. We're not talking hours, to quote most residential painting projects.
Totally. So, given that you and I both align on this concept, I think digging into some of the benefits are probably key. We've looked at a couple of them, but and maybe we should also just really quickly define what this isn't.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Like production rate estimating, like, what is it not? It's not square footage pricing. And I think a lot of people get a little bit sidetracked with that. Square footage pricing can work. It's just really complicated to adjust over time.
I don't understand how it works. I'm
How
gonna
it
be
works?
honest with you.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean,
I get the concept, but
mhm.
I've heard people do that. I remember, like when we were, transitioning into doing some commercial work and stuff. People, whatever, like general contractors would ask, like, "Oh, what's your square footage price?" And I don't understand the question. Like,
Yeah,
like
true, true.
what are we painting? I don't square footage on walls. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, I can give you that, but it's like, what about the trim? Are we doing trim or no trim or? That's
yeah.
where I don't get it. Like, I don't understand how that works.
Uh, you know, I think there's also a lot of what is square footage pricing. I mean, there's a lot that is misunderstood about it, because I think
Okay.
if you were to go and if somebody said, like, especially contractors who are saying, what's your square footage price for it's a 2,000 square foot house, how much is this going to cost per square foot? That's a really, in my mind, ridiculous question. Like, we're not painting the floors, are we? Are we painting the walls, the ceiling, the trim, the doors? Like, how do you get down to a price for floor, or on a floor basis for everything? Like I remember asking, early on in my painting career, asking someone, like, well, what would be the right price for this? And the guy was like, well, how much does a bag of groceries cost? And it's like, yeah, that actually makes sense. Like, I don't know what's in the bag of groceries. And with square footage
Filet
pricing,
mignon.
what's that?
You get some filet mignon and some,
So,
nice Cabernet.
exactly, right? And so, like, when somebody says, like, what's your square footage price? My response now is, well, how much does a bag of groceries cost?
Good.
Because they don't understand what they're asking. Now, when I say that square footage pricing can work, it's really as a reflection of production rate estimating. So if you backtrack, how long does it take for you to do, say, 100, like, say you can do 100 square feet of drywall an hour, two
Sure.
coats of paint. If you want to backtrack that, you can figure out your square footage price based on your hourly rate.
Hmm.
But it's like going 3 steps too far.
Hmm.
Whereas in production rate estimating, like, it is not square footage pricing. What it is it's using square feet in order to figure out your pricing. And that's a very different approach.
I think, is my understanding that square footage pricing is meant to be like the floor. So it's like, I have a 3,000 square foot residence that somebody needs to paint. What do you guys charge? And it's like, oh, we charge $2 to $3 a square foot, so it's going to be $6,000 to $9,000. Is that?
That's what I believe it is.
Yeah.
Like,
And
and
then
that to me has never made sense. In fact, that's, like, I think a big reason that holds our industry back
I agree.
is that number right there that's thrown around when you go to the paint stores or you talk to different people, and they're like, what's your price? That number, by the way, like, having started 15 years ago in the painting industry, has not changed.
I was thinking that.
I don't know if you've realized
Isn't
this,
it
but,
like
like,
always like $2 to $4, or I don't even know, something like that. I've seen it all the
yeah,
time.
it's like, guys, inflation has been, like, through the roof.
That's the
Prices have
thing.
changed. Like, people are getting paid a lot more, and you're still charging, like, your customer $2 a square foot for a floor space for walls that, like, you don't know if they're 8, 10, 12 feet with, like,
Oh, yeah.
it's wild. It's wild. I'm with you on that. Like, I am generally confused. And
I
I
could.
remember, like, going back to, like, early days, trying to figure this out for myself. That was what was presented to me. And I remember just, like, sitting at home being like, oh, I don't know. I don't know how to do this. And then you give someone a price and it's like way out to lunch. You end up losing your shirt on the job. You're like, okay, well, maybe if it wasn't $2, maybe it's $2.50 is the right number. And so now you're just, like, wildly guessing. So anyways, yeah,
I
that
remember.
all that said,
So
yeah.
this is just a slightly off topic, but I remember, like, when we were first asked this, and I had a sales rep, and I didn't even know what it meant. So I literally went and asked our Sherwin-Williams rep. I was like, all right, stupid question, but we give you a lot of money, so you're just going to answer my stupid question.
Mm-hmm.
And we're working on this big quote for a general contractor on this, whatever, I don't remember what it's, commercial project or whatever, something we probably had no business quoting. And I need
Of
some help.
course. Yeah.
And he wants to know what our price is per square foot. And I'm like, he's obviously really intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to ask him. And so he explained what we're talking about. And I was like, huh? It's like, okay. And so I remember we went and, like, we tried to figure this out by looking at, like, past quotes that we had done with production rate.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, we're coming up with these numbers, and they're all over the place because every house, everything's different. Like, oh, well, in this house we painted the ceiling, so, like, with this house we only painted the walls, and This house had, a lot of trim in it. And it's like, and so it was just like this wild, like middle, like thing. And I didn't remember, we didn't obviously win the job, thank God.
Yeah.
I remember we
Dodged
spent
a bullet there.
hours, we like spent hours in the office, like calculating this.
Right.
And I was more confused afterwards.
Right. Yeah, that's a like, so going back to like what this conversation is about, like this is about understanding your business, about how to translate your business into a price for your customer. And I think what's backwards about most square footage pricing is that you're trying to fit your business into what your customer is asking you for. And that's a mistake. Like that really will lead you astray. And so, anyways, this is not square footage pricing. This is not guesstimating, right? Like this production rate estimating is going to have a couple of variables that you need to estimate, mostly being prep, maybe some difficulty stuff like access, that kind of thing. But for the most part, you're baselining it off of how your team performs and you're adjusting that. So this is not guessing, not square footage pricing. What is it not in your mind? What else? Is there anything else?
Yeah, I mean, it's not based on like what my competitors are charging.
True. Yeah, not at all.
I mean, again, that's one of my like least favorite questions, and in the Facebook chats and things like, oh, how much should I charge for whatever? You can ask how long should it take for someone to paint X. Mm-hmm. That's a great conversation that we probably should spend more time having in our industry.
Yeah.
But how much does it cost to paint? Again, some like here's a 4,000 square foot house. How much would you guys think this is going to cost? It's like, what? and then it's funny too, though. People get upset when customers ask for pricing over the phone. It's like they're literally doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. Like, how much would it cost to paint a couple bedrooms and a living room? Like, I don't know. Like, oh, by the way, there's wallpaper up for. Oh, well, that kind of makes a difference.
Yeah.
So anyways, yeah, I don't know. It's just, it's not that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, okay. I mean, so now we've defined what it is. Let's explain maybe, some of the benefits to people that are tuning in. And I'll start. Like, for one, what changed for me when I moved from essentially what was guesstimating or educated guessing to production rates is that I, for the first time, understood what impact my labor cost had, what impact my materials cost had, because in our world, we decided to include materials within our hourly rate, which is possible in production rate estimating because materials stay pretty standard across the board. Some people feel uncomfortable with that. I get it. But we were understanding where our profit margins would lie and where our overhead costs were. And so for the first time, I understood what every hour I was selling to a customer meant to me. And the power in that blew my mind. Like, I was like, I can do this. I can actually sell 1 hour and know that I will make profit on that. Mm-hmm. And so that was a huge benefit, and one that I continue I continue to see in businesses all over the place that use this method, is that there's levers you can pull in order to increase your profit, or just take care of paint price increases, take care of labor cost increases that don't require you to redesign the whole program. So having that fall into your labor rate, or your cost per hour, for most people, that's how they would call it, was huge. So that was the first benefit for me. What do you think?
I agree 100%. And I would take that the next step, which I think you would agree with, is then it allows you to job cost and analyze the job afterwards. Mm-hmm. And instead of just saying, hey, did we make money? It allows us to say, how did we do on the efficiency or productivity side? Mm-hmm. So let's set aside the money part. There's kind of two things to production rate in my mind, and I think you agree. How long should it take, and how much do we need to charge? Two different questions.
Totally.
And sometimes those two questions can change based on, perhaps what time of year we might charge different rates, for example. Mm-hmm. But if we go back to the idea of job costing is generally did we make money? And again, let's just say the answer is no, and we didn't make as much as we wanted. Does that mean that we need to charge more? But maybe, perhaps, or we need to do better training, or there could be some other things going on there. But let's just say it means we need to charge more. Okay, do we need to raise our hourly rate, or do we need to just give more time for the crew?
Right.
Right? And it's just like, okay, well, let's say we need to give more time, which we would only know if we use production rate estimating, because we have a baseline. We know that this project should take 50 hours. It took 55. That's not great. It took longer than it was supposed to. Okay, but again, now with using production rate estimating, instead of just saying this should take 50 hours, and we just kind of guessed, I can go in and say, okay, why? Was it because, the walls, to use the example from before, took more time than 100 square feet per hour? Great, now I can adjust that. Or maybe it was the doors. Wow, the doors in this house, they actually have a lot of like intricate detail on them. And so we use like a flat door, like the one in your background there, right? That's a pretty smooth flat door. That's a little different than painting maybe a 6-panel door.
Right.
Got it. Okay, we need to have a different production rate for a 6-panel door, and it needs to have a little more time allocated than does for that flat door. Great. Now I can fix that. Where if I'm doing other forms of trying to come up with a price, I don't have that level of specificity to know, for example, that maybe it takes 45 minutes to paint the door behind you, but it's going to take an hour and 15 minutes to paint the 6-panel door, or whatever, right? Those numbers I just made them up, so they might be completely wrong for the average painting contractor, but that's awesome. Like, that's the beauty of this whole thing, is you get to make that to that level of detail accurate to your company and your methods, and how you do things. That to me is like the real beauty of production rate estimating is you can drill down a little bit more to really kind of analyze what needs adjusting. Absolutely.
And when you start giving that time to the people doing the work, it's going to be, in my experience, it becomes it gives them a target, right? And so you can find out pretty quickly, like, hey, we estimated an hour and a half for this door. How long did it actually take you? And they'll tell you, like, wow, I really tried hard for an hour and a half, but it was an hour 45. Okay, all right. And somebody else in your team, like, did you try for that door? Yeah, I tried for an hour and a half, and it was an hour and 45. Okay, now we can adjust. We can work on it. But I think going back to what you said, like, when you do job costing based on a cost, was the cost right? We just have no levers to pull to understand what it was. And so next time you go into it, you just raise your price because maybe it was low, or you thought it was low. That's not accurate, though, to what the job what happened. And so it becomes kind of shooting in the dark, I think, without that method. So
and you're very like reactionary, right? You're not getting ahead of the issue. You're just kind of hoping that you're solving for it. It's almost like whack-a-mole, because you really don't know what the issue is.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next one here, because I think this is interesting. I think there's one issue that I really don't like about the paint industry, the industry that we're in, and that's that a lot of times the questions I hear are like, how do I get my customer to buy? What's the right price to get my customer to buy? And so a lot of other ways of estimating are just trying to figure out, like, how do I just get a person to buy? And we start to think that it's price that makes people buy. And what I love about production rate estimating is that I don't let our sales team dictate what the price should be, because that's a business thing, right? Like, we have labor costs that we've deemed to be correct. We have overhead that we can't change. Our materials aren't going to change. So we know what our price should be based on, having done thousands of jobs. We've collected a lot of data, and we kind of know. And so when a customer says to us, well, so-and-so is this much cheaper than us, and will you match that price? We know with 100% accuracy, we cannot do that. That their price is incorrect for the type of work that they've asked us to do and the type of company we are. And so I always worry when I hear that question that we're taking away credibility from our industry by saying, well, any price will kind of do. And And so I love the reason that I'm such a passionate advocate for this type of estimating is that I don't, I want to run a business, and nobody goes into you know, a store to buy shoes and says, well, I have $80 and those are 120. Would you take, like, I can do 80. And for them to say, sure, 80 is fine because we have no idea what the cost of these are. And we just want to sell you a pair of shoes. It's like, that doesn't happen. So anyways, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I mean, it's so one, I think it's operating from more of an abundance mindset, right? It's like we don't, it's
True.
okay, right? Like maybe this customer isn't the right customer.
Mhm.
I think I have so many thoughts here. So two, I think, there's a fallacy that like customers are buying because of price.
Mhm.
And, I think it's like you have to take it both ways, right? So if you're a sales rep and the reason customers don't buy is because your price is too high, then what's the reason that they do buy? It's because if it's because you're a good sales rep, you did something well, high five me. We got to look in the mirror on the jobs that don't sell. Because,
Mhm.
again, especially if it's production rate estimating, pricing should be consistent, or how we're applying pricing. Obviously, the price is not exactly the same because everybody's house is different.
Mhm.
People don't buy because of price. People will say they don't buy based on price, but there's been a lot of studies that have been done outside of our industry that show that like price is not one of the top 5 reasons that people make buying decisions. People buy things emotionally, um, and they might like justify it afterwards based on price, but they're buying it whether or not they like you, whether or not you have a good reputation, whether or not you showed up on time, what are you wearing, how do you smell, all of
Mhm.
those things are factoring in. And if they didn't factor in, why would we ever even go to the house, right? Like, why don't we just sell painting jobs? Just go on my website, put in your square footage of your house, and it'll tell you how much it costs to paint it, and put your credit card in, and we'll come paint it.
Mhm.
I don't think any paint company owner signing up for that. I mean, I don't know, kind of sounds cool, maybe, but I
If it
think
was
that
possible, I'd be in. I'll just say
yeah, but
that.
I think like the problem there is we're losing that human interaction, right? And that like that sales rep touch, if you
Mhm.
will. And I think people, homeowners, customers are buying that relationship, and they're buying the experience that they're going to get. And do they trust you? We win jobs all the time that we are the highest price. We are most often the highest price or one of the higher prices in our market. I'm sure you guys are the same way. And I hear that all the time. So yeah, we lose jobs because customers say, our price was too high, and that's okay. And we win jobs all the time as the highest price. So like those two things can't. We have to solve for something else. And then
Mhm.
what else we're solving for is great. I need to provide more value to the person who said my price was too high. And I need to do a better job as a sales professional of explaining that value in a way that they hear it well and understand it and can see the value in it.
Yeah, absolutely. So well said. And I think there's to your point though about abundance. I don't judge anybody who's in a situation where they need work tomorrow. Um, I think though, if to those people who are maybe listening to this, like if you can at least understand what you're giving up and doing that through assessing the job through time, figuring out like how long is this going to take, and being okay to understand that you're giving away a lot of value in order to stay busy, to keep people busy. Like these are decisions you can make as a business owner. They're not long-term decisions because it's hard to stay in business that way. And I think that um, ultimately it devalues our trade. But um, sometimes you gotta make a decision. Now, what we're talking about with this is that you understand why you're making it or how that impacts
Mm-hmm.
your company. And so yeah, I
Yeah.
think that, like we've done it before too. Like keep a crew busy for a week. We might not make any money, but we know that the week after we have good jobs coming up. And so
Mhm.
we want to use this as a tool to make good business decisions
Oh,
at
yeah,
the end of
for
the
sure.
day. So
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's it's the beginning of December as we're recording this, and it's so it's we're heading into winter,
mhm,
and there's a lot of we do that all the time. I mean, this is a good strategic time. So one, we want to keep our current staff busy so we don't lose them.
mhm,
I think that is the deciding factor in our industry. The painting companies that grow, the ones that ultimately win, are the ones who don't lose good people just because it gets winter.
mhm.
Winter is a predictable event. It usually gets cold, in the northern half of North America come November at the latest. And so it's like hopefully we're already preparing for that. And
Mhm.
we prepare, one, to keep our painters busy, and two, to go hire other good people from painting companies or elsewhere that were maybe laid off by companies that weren't as prepared.
Mhm.
And so not only do we want to be strategic enough to keep our current staff busy, but we're actively hiring right now. We're
Mhm.
interviewing a lot of people, and we're hoping to bring in a handful of good team members over the next 2 or 3 months. And in order to do that, we've got to have work for them to do. They don't want to come work here for 25 hours a week. And
Mhm.
so sometimes that means we're providing discounts. I would say often this time of year it means we're providing discounts. And we do that not based on emotion and not based on guessing, but based on our production rates and our costs. I know exactly how much I can lower a price and still break even, and making good decisions. It's not based on you know emotions and feelings. It's based on math and data.
Totally. Totally. So let's you get to move on to another point here,
I mean,
which I think
real quick,
or
the one other thing I
yeah.
want to say, and you've heard this before, is when a customer says, hey, your price is higher than somebody else's. First of all, I always want to phrase that, and okay, well let's talk about why is their price so much lower.
Yeah.
And I think as a sales professional, I have to have that mindset if my customer's ever going to. But
Mhm.
I didn't invent this. You've heard this before that there's three ways or there's three things that go into coming up with a price, and this is what we're talking about today. And I think ultimately this is fact. Whether however you want to get to your price, this is what we're doing. There's three things: how many hours are going into that job, how much does each hour cost, and how much does the materials cost.
Mhm.
Those are the three things. And so if I give somebody a bid and you give a bid on the same exact house, our prices are going to be different.
Mhm.
And so then why are they different? You and I, we're very far apart in our markets, right? But
Mhm.
we can compare these things together once we can hold for those three things. And so if we were to look at a picture of a house, or we both went to a house or whatever, and we can both do the exact same quote, and our prices are different, we can figure it out based on one of those three things, if not more than one. Just
Mhm.
like, okay, well, great. So you gave more hours. Why? And it's just like, well, how about, was it the siding? Nope, looks like we gave the same on the siding. Was it the windows? Oh, got it. Okay, so you thought these were the windows that take 2 hours a window. I thought they were the windows that take an hour and a half. And you might say, wow, like, how do you guys paint them so fast? And we can, kind of get into that.
Mhm.
Or we might say, well, you are charging, X per hour, and I'm charging Y per hour, and those are different, and why? And it might be because, we provide health insurance, and you're like, oh, so do we. And it's like, whatever. We can get down to where are those rates coming from? And
Mhm.
then obviously we can talk about materials, and that's the easy one. That's the one that unfortunately usually paint contractors only ever talk about,
Mhm.
which is, are we using Promar 200 or are we using duration? And it's like, yes, that is a factor for sure, but it's much less so than that first factor, right? We know that materials are typically only 15% of the cost. And so while that is one of the biggest three factors, it's by far the smallest of those. And so we need to really understand those first two factors really well, not just to talk with other business owners, but to analyze our own business so that we can make those decisions and also
Mhm.
have those conversations with customers who are trying to make a decision. and say, why is your price so much higher? I would say to a customer, well, it's one of these three things.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, is our labor rate that much different? It's like, well, maybe, comparing us to one of our competitors, Mr. Customer,
Yeah.
all of our employees have full benefits, and we believe that provides you with a better experience
Mm-hmm.
because our employees are really bought into what we're doing, and they, I think, enjoy coming to work every day. And so because of that, we think they're going to provide you with the best experience. You don't have to take my word for it. Go read our reviews online. They kind of speak for themselves. And
Right.
now all of a sudden, I'm putting this into a way that the customer can see the value we're providing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so well said. The only thing I would say to that, though, is I think the reason why we get stuck in the conversation about paint, which you're absolutely 100% correct. Like, paint generally is what, 10 to 15% of your cost.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're using Promar 200 versus duration, at the end of the day, this might be like a 3% difference,
Mm-hmm.
maybe. But it's the one thing that customers understand,
Mm-hmm.
right? They understand quality of product. It's a little bit harder, I think, for some customers to understand the time argument. Although
and the
I think
quality
it's
of time.
valid. And quality of time. Yeah,
Right.
those two things are a little bit harder to
Mm-hmm.
wrap your head around.
For sure.
But the one question that I think is always funny, and it's very rarely asked, and I think customers should ask it more, is, hey, how did you come up with your price? And I I asked a customer a couple of years ago. I said, like, do you ever ask this question to people? As she was saying, like, you guys are more expensive. I said, hey, fair. I mean, you need to make a decision that's good for you. Like, I'm here to help.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel like there's a better decision for you that's cheaper, that's fine. But have you asked the contractor how they came up with their price? Because I'm more than happy to talk about that process with you, because I think the way that we come up with price gets you the value you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And so she went back and she asked this contractor and said, how do you, I just got to ask, how do you come up with your price? And she said it was like watching someone see a ghost. It was like, and then the response that came out of his mouth was, do you really ask the kitchen how they put together a hamburger? And I was like, and so she came back and was like, yeah, I'm working with you guys because, like, you've explained to me the time, you've explained to me the product, I know what value you're giving. I don't really care about asking somebody what went into a hamburger to the kitchen. Like, and so that question, right? Like, when you actually break it down, if you're using a system like production rate estimating, I have a very good answer for you. Well, like, people say, like, how do you come up with your price? Look, we assess this job based on the parameters you've given us and what you'd like to do. We've, through our experience, figured out how long these things take.
Yep.
And then we charge for our time based on the structure of our business.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll inevitably say, well, how much you charge for your time? I'll say, it's actually complicated because we include our material costs, we include a bunch of other variables in there, and I feel it wouldn't be a fair reflection of our business if I were to share that with you. But what I can tell you is your price is this, and that's how we got there.
Mm-hmm.
And
for sure. And that's, I think like that example is great. I think the guy that, this other example that had you, asking about how the hamburger's made is so offended. One, because they don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, to your point you just made, I don't think you have to explain every detail.
No.
Right? Because at the end of the day, customers should not pay for things that they don't find value in. And I think as business owners, our job is to try to be able to provide our customers with the best experience we can at a low price where we can still make a good profit. We should not be charging our customers for, a bloated business. Jeff Bezos, I think it was, famously said of his competitors that your margin is my opportunity. I believe I'm crediting that correctly to the right person.
You are. Yeah, I just read that recently. Yeah.
Okay. And it's like, and I believe that to be true, right? Like, I'm constantly trying to find the inefficiencies and then the waste in the things that we do that customers don't find value in. But, I will say to somebody like, yes, our price is more expensive, maybe because of the benefits we provide. And here's why we believe that gives you a better value, like I said a minute ago.
Mm.
But we also have an office staff. And, if you ever worked with a contractor before, have you ever had an experience where you couldn't get a hold of somebody and you didn't know what was going on or when they were going to be at your house? That's not going to happen here.
Mm-hmm.
You can call us and get a hold of us. And if you don't, somebody's going to call you right back or send you a text message or, all of the things, because it's not just a one-man show. Not to say there's anything wrong with that, but it is just a different value proposition. And some customers don't care. Some customers are like, I don't want to pay for that. I don't care. I just want you to come out and put the paint where it's supposed to go. And it's like, that's great. You're going to think our price is too high.
Yeah, and that's totally fine. Like, people need to make assessments of what they feel is valuable to them, and we're never going to be able to change that. We're really, as sales professionals, trying to assess whether our value is a match for them, right? Like, what are you looking for? Tell me, because if it's a lowest price, I should go home right now, and that's fine. Like, if you want lowest price, there's lots of options, but let's just talk about why you might be calling us back later if that's the case, right? Like, these types of things you're trying to help the person understand how their values align with what you're selling. And I think, getting back to this discussion of kind of like the style of estimating that we're talking about, you get to build all of that stuff you talked about, like your overhead in your office and your great warranty that you guys provide, into an hourly rate, into a charge rate. And you understand how that impacts your price at the end of the day. So we're not just more expensive because we're expensive because of XYZ, right? And if that value aligns with you, you're gonna be an awesome customer of ours, and you're gonna love what we do. If it doesn't, we should not work together, and that's okay. Like, I think we get mixed up in this idea as when you're trying to sell something that everyone's a customer, and they're just not, right? Like, we're shooting for 50%. I think you guys probably are too. Like, we want to win 50% of the jobs we bid, but that's half the people, even after we qualify them, just aren't the right fit, and that's okay. But we need to know how to price in order to reflect that. So, let's move on to the next point. You good with that?
Yep.
I think we mentioned this earlier on, but there's been no other method I've found for estimating a paint job than production rate estimating using time to give our crews a path to a profitable job. And we do this through a work order. We pass along the information that we bid, but it gives them a clear direction of the amount of time things take or should take. And I've found incredible value in that. Any thoughts there?
For sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's huge, right? I think most people, when given a clearly defined goal that they feel is attainable, are motivated to achieve that. And maybe most is the wrong word, but at least, that is like a common factor, if you will. And when there is no goal or it's not attainable, then it's not motivating. It's hard to say, I don't know, I'll just use a better example. Like, we do that all the time. I mean, I remember when I used to run jobs, that was my favorite thing. We knew that a window should, take an hour and a half to paint, and we would have little competitions. And for me personally, even without anyone else involved, that's what motivated me. I just wanted to see, could I do this a little bit better? Last time it took me 45 minutes to paint, this section of siding that was, 10 by 10. And it's I wonder if I could do it in 40. I wonder if I, got the different type of ladder or whatever it was, I could do this a little bit more efficiently, as opposed to just just go out and, paint the house and see how you do.
Yeah.
Just by breaking it down into little bite-sized chunks, it's much more manageable, much more motivating, and I think much more efficient. We actually by giving our crews and our crew leaders clearly defined goals, they paint things much more efficiently, um, simply by having that clearer goal.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean it's interesting how that works, right? Once you have a destination, you can get there. But I think without a destination, any journey will do, and I think that's where a lot of issues come for sure.
Sure.
So
Well, and it allows us to like better train our painters.
yeah,
Going back to some of the stuff we talked about earlier, I might have somebody who's really good at painting walls with the roller, but they're very slow when it comes time to, do the detail cutting and trim work or whatever it is.
mm-hmm.
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me to spend a bunch of time talking about how to roll faster.
Right.
Maybe it's just setting up the room. Like maybe they're very fast once we start painting, but it takes them 4 hours to move the furniture and patch the holes and protect the floor so we don't get paint on it. Where is 4 hours good? Is 4 hours bad? I don't really know until we define the standard.
Mm-hmm.
What's the standard? Well, if the standard's 2 hours and 85% of our painters can get this done in less than 2 hours, and you're doing it in 4, let's figure out why.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what production rate estimating is.
And by the way, did you know other people are doing it faster than you? Right? Like I think
for sure
the argument is always, well, this is how long it should take. And it's like, well, actually, no. I can't agree with that because of this data, and you can have that conversation, and it's based on something, right? And I think, we talked about job costing earlier. What's interesting is that, we've, for many years running like a multi-million-dollar painting business, we didn't job cost. You know what we did? We just looked at hours.
Mm-hmm.
Did the hours match what the work order was? Because if it did, we made money.
Mm-hmm.
And if it didn't, we're going to dig into why the time made a difference. And we were very profitable, functioned very smoothly, based on the fact that we knew with like incredible accuracy what an hour was worth to us. And so we weren't going through this process of being like, well, did we make a profit?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, we know when we did because we were under hours and our material lined up to what we bid. Those two things right there, boom, done. And so obviously job costing is really important, and we do that now, but it's more to dig into details about how each individual sales rep is working and how each individual crew is working. We found more details in that. But overall as a business, I can tell you how we're doing month to month by how many hours over or under we are to the hours we bid, with like an insane amount of accuracy. If we're 10% over on the hours that we bid for that month, well, I'm going to guess that our profit margin wasn't very good. But if we're 10% under, I'm going to guess it's pretty good. And I'm almost always right. And so like that, the time element, the ability to give your crew that time, understand it for your business, really has driven the success for us of our production and our sales. Those two things have been really intertwined, and they have to be for a good painting business to work.
I think to take that a step further, though, if somebody doesn't use production rate estimating, how the heck do you schedule jobs?
Right. How do you know?
How do you have any idea? Like, is this this is like a 2-ish day? Like, this is just like a 3-ish day thing? Or is it like, because if it's 2.5, like, are we going to go, we should probably know that. So maybe we can have that next job ready, the middle of day 2.5 to go start.
Right.
Because if we just send all the painters home, that's a way to not run a great business.
Right, exactly.
Leaving a lot of revenue on the table.
Yeah, and you're leaving unhappy staff, people that are getting those 25 hours a week of work that you talked about. That's not good for anybody.
How do you how do you know like we're gonna be ready for the next job? I don't get it. Again, the more we talk about this, like there literally is only one answer. As to how to run a successful painting business at scale. So again, we can define what that means. We can define what successful means, and we can define what at scale means. And I'm not saying if somebody doesn't do production rate estimating exactly how we do it, that they can't be successful, because that's not true. But if I would argue that if somebody is running a successful business at scale, they're using production rate estimating. They just might call it something different.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, we're looking at pictures and we're saying this takes, this costs X to paint.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Why? Well, because it's going to take 2 days. Okay. For how many people? Well, our crews are 2. Okay. Do they work 8-hour days? Yes. Okay, great. So that's 32 hours, which is production rate. We're right back to where we started.
Yes. Although it's not super accurate, like you're breaking it down in time, you can get more accurate as you go.
Right.
But you've started with an assessment of time, and then you're going to be able to see at the end of the day, did that time, was it effectively used? And then once you start building, we're talking about standardization. Like this is a really great method to standardize. Like I'm with you. Like obviously, we align on this a lot, and so that makes the conversation hard because I would love at some point to have another voice in the room to really just say like, hey, look, this is why this doesn't work, or what the issues are, because I haven't experienced any of it. In fact, only thing I've experienced has been amazing. And are we perfect every time? Do we do perfect estimates every time? No. Do we make mistakes? Absolutely. But we learn from those mistakes. We adjust, we reevaluate, we come back better. And I don't think there's any method that's perfect. So this is, I think this is the only method, candidly, but hey, yeah.
But it's also, this isn't like some unique thing to the painting industry.
No.
But if you go, you don't want me fixing your car, but I know that when I go to if I go to a reputable car repair place, right, an auto mechanic, they have a book that says this is how long it takes to replace the muffler on the, whatever, Toyota Camry. They know, like, that they're not, like, do you think they, like, just guess? They're just like, well, whatever. The one time we did it on a Jeep, it took 4 hours, and so, I don't know, we'll say 3.5 on this one. Like, no, maybe that's how you started, I guess. At some point, somebody had to start. But it's like, no, there's just a clearly defined book that tells their technicians, this is how long this takes, and we're going to charge the customer based on this, and the parts, and all the other things that go into it. And then they can make adjustments. Again, this isn't unique. Like, we're not rewriting the wheel here. This is how most businesses are going to, price similar types of things.
Totally. Yeah. So let's maybe, we obviously, you and I this is a very interesting discussion because both of us are passionate about it, and I think we both have struggles to see an alternative route. But maybe we can talk about some of the, is there drawbacks here? Is there concerns that people should have? Anything there that we should be discussing?
I think the drawbacks are if you can be there. It is hard to define what are enough production rates or different types of substrates and what are too many. Some houses, I don't know, on a Victorian house, right? So we have a lot of old housing stock in our, Cleveland market here. And so there are some really ornate trim, on exteriors or even on interiors of homes. I was in a house, they had all this really ornate plaster work. And we don't have production rates for that. That's not what we do all the time. But what we do have is production rates for different types of trim. And so what that allows me to do is have a baseline. It gives me a starting point to go, okay, this looks like it's twice as hard as, the smooth trim or whatever. And so if the smooth trim is 15 feet an hour, I'm going to say it's going to be, 2 hours for every 15 feet for this really ornate trim.
Totally.
And while that's not perfect, it's better than just a wild ass guess.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think, you make a really good point there about how much is enough, how much is too little. It's interesting because in looking at a lot of rates over the years and kind of examining things, it's almost like you can start from like 4 basic rates and start working off that. It's kind of wild for painters, like, or for our the work we do. It's like, vertical flat surface, 100 square feet an hour, like trim horizontal surface, 25 square feet an hour for 2 coats, maybe 30, 35, like kind of depends a little bit. I mean, I think we were now using 35. We're a little faster at that. A window or like an opening, let's start at an hour. Door trim, an hour, like, and then you build complexity off that, right? So now I've got a bay window. It's got 3 windows. They're attached. Is that exactly 3 hours? Well, they're attached, so it's probably a little bit less. So let's call that 2.5. 2. I don't know, something like that. And so now I'm not like looking at it and being like, I don't know. But I'm using the data I have available to make educated estimates of that time, and that really helps. So yeah, definitely a drawback. It's not perfect. Some of the jobs, like I said before, are going to be a little bit. You're going to have winners. You're going to have some losers. It's just kind of part of it. We're trying to have a balanced business. I think both you and I.
Mm-hmm.
So the good offset the bad, and we work that through. And some people get great deals, and some people pay a little bit more. And at the end of the day, we're looking for a profit margin that works. So
what would you say if somebody says one of the drawbacks of production rate estimating is it takes too long? What would your answer be?
What's too long? Because I can do an estimate in 5 to 10 minutes.
But you've been doing this. I mean, so I'll play devil's advocate. You've been doing this for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I would imagine if you hired a new sales rep, they're not doing it in 5 to 10 minutes.
It's true.
So I'm I'm whatever painting company guy. I've never used production rates before, and I'm saying it's too complicated and it's going to take too long for me to sit there and have to calculate exactly like how many square feet of walls. I just know like a bedroom costs $400.
Right.
Help me understand why that is a fallacy and it doesn't take too long.
I mean, a lot of it's going to depend on how you do it, I think. Okay. And, obviously being, powered by PaintScout here, and somebody who, I designed PaintScout. So, PaintScout. I mean, I try to design the most effective way of entering information possible. Sure. And I remember going through this manually, writing it all into the sheets. I don't know if you ever had that experience, like taking down dimensions and coming back, throwing it into a spreadsheet. Yes, it takes time. But with modern tools, things that are available, you can cut that time down immensely. Because whatever that room was that you typed in $400 for, assuming you're using software, we're just putting in the same dimensions of that room and using a production rate, tapping walls and getting a price. Mm-hmm. And so, does it need to be accurate to every foot or not? You could probably walk in and be like, oh, it's a 12 by 15 room, tap that in and boom, you have a price. Mm-hmm. And so I think the method in which you do it matters. But I don't, to somebody who's, concerned about the time, I think you got to try it. Because
wrong.
What's that?
Yeah, they're just wrong.
Give it a shot and be like, look, I'm going to put aside my head trash on this and be like, this is actually good. Because we've shown time and time again that new reps, they'll start slow. It might be half an hour, 45 minutes, but they get to 5 minutes in a month. Mm-hmm. Like 3 to 4 weeks of using a good system. You start to learn the habits, you learn the ways to do this faster, and it works. So That's my answer. You can do it.
So you can do it without software. You can do it without a computer. Oh, yeah. You can do it without Excel.
Absolutely.
That's how I learned.
Yeah.
So again, when I was in college, and for a long time after college, when I started this business, I did at all of my estimates on a piece of paper with a pencil, and I would literally walk around the house, and I would just write down raw data. So I would, I've got whatever, let's just say we're looking at the outside, right? So I'd be like, all right, I've got 20 by 10 of siding and I've got 20 by 10 of cedar shake, or, hardwood siding, cedar shake. And then the next section, I've got a little triangle up there. So that's 10, 10 by 5 or whatever, right? And I'm just writing all these things down. On the piece of paper, you would see 10 by 10, 10 by 5, 18, we would just round it, right? So it'd be 20 by 20, whatever it was. And you would just have like columns on the paper of each little like geometric piece of house, right? And then how many windows and how many doors and how many shutters, and you'd have all this stuff on your page. And then I'd go sit in the truck or sit in the car. I'd sit in my little Honda Accord, literally, with my little ladder rack on top. I've got pictures to prove it. And I would sit there and we would write it out. And yes, like we'd use a calculator. I'm so good at mental math. I'm still good at it because I would sit there. It would be faster for me to just 10 by 5, 10 by 10, add them all up. And then I just had a laminated piece of paper and it had my production rates on it. And we would adjust that. Now then, we adjust a lot now, but we would adjust it about once a year. And we would just try to go back in the winter really and try to evaluate like some jobs. And again, I'm not advocating it. That's, you should do it more than that. But that's what we did. And I would say, okay, I've got 1,829 square feet of siding or whatever. And then I would just say, okay, well, for what, this is cedar shake siding. So then we would divide that by, 75 square feet an hour. Great. That tells me exactly how many hours it is. I total up all my hours, get a total. And then at the bottom, I would just say, okay, and how much does an hour cost? And it's whatever, $70 an hour. Certainly wasn't when I back then.
Yeah.
And I was probably, and I knew I was charging way too little. Plus, there's inflation. And that was the price, and that was that. And I could do all of that in 45 minutes.
Sure. Yeah.
And then I had to hand write out a contract on a carbon-like stupid contract form thing. Oh my goodness, my hand would hurt. And it was cold out. My pen would freeze. It was, oh my goodness.
Come home with hand cramps. Can't pick anything up at the end of the night. Yeah. Yeah. So what you're saying though is like it's absolutely true. Like I think there's no reason, like that argument to me doesn't hold much weight. That it takes too long, because the counterpoint is that, and this has happened on so many bids that I've done, is I'll come into the house. Have the iPad out, put in the dimensions, and then I'll show back up and talk to the customer. And I'll say, okay, like I'd love to chat with you just a little bit about this, if that's okay, we sit down. Like, do you have another 5 or 10 minutes? And they'll say, what were you doing? I'll say, well, I was just itemizing, counting, getting all of my measurements. It took me about 15 minutes total. I've got the contract written up, everything's good to go. And they'd said, well, and I'd say, well, you kind of ask, like the way you're asking makes me seem like you're confused that I'm here that long. And they're like, well, the last 2 guys that came stood in our front entryway, looked around, said, how many square feet is this? And left. And the question I had was, well, who do you feel more comfortable with? Who do you think it was, Michael? And so
Jon, I actually just charge people based on the type of car they have. So
as you should.
You get charged a lot of money, and if you charge a not nice car, then I charge less money.
Great point, but what does a lot and a little mean to you?
Well, it just depends on how much work we have.
Yeah, right, exactly. If I won or lost on the last job.
Yeah, exactly.
But like that is what our industry is doing. Is like it takes too long. So in order to combat that, I'm going to take 5 seconds. I'm going to drive to your house, say hello, ask the square footage, and leave. Therefore, using a method of estimation that is making our industry look bad, making us look unprofessional, and then saying like this guy's cheaper, and it's like, what are we doing? Like it really cuts the core of me, those types of conversations, because I'm like, as a customer, how do you feel when someone does that to you? It doesn't feel good.
I don't know. So first of all, I agree. Yeah, I agree 100%, obviously. But I think more to the point, it's like, don't do this because we say so. It's like evaluate if somebody's not doing this and their business is wildly profitable, great. Like, who are we? Like, that's awesome.
Mhm.
But our industry is not.
No.
There's not a whole. There are companies. Don't get me wrong. There are companies in our industry that are extremely successful that I look up to and I aspire to be like, and when I grow up.
Mhm.
But that's not like the most common experience in our industry is business owners are working way too hard for way too little pay, and I would like to see that stop. I think we have way too many really hardworking, really talented people in our industry that are owners and employees that are underpaid.
Mhm.
And I think one of the most important things to solving that is pricing.
Mhm.
We don't charge enough, and don't like we don't accurately charge. It's not just simply raise prices, although that's part of it.
Mhm.
But we need to accurately charge so that we're not charging more to the guy with the nice car and charging less to the guy with the not nice car or the
Mhm.
big house or whatever it is. It's like that is not how you run a professional business. I don't think anybody's really making that argument. Yeah, with production rate estimating, it's it's just easier. Like it is
Mhm.
just more predictable to know that we're gonna make a profit. It's not a guess. This running a business is hard, but it's not overly complicated. It's actually relatively simple. Our
Mhm.
industry is relatively simple.
Mhm.
What you have to do to run a successful, profitable business is not easy, but it's not complicated.
Right. And lots of people have done it before, right? Like we can
For
kind of learn
sure,
from them.
100%.
Um, all right. I should also say, yeah, like you made a great point there that people do this like if you are running a successful business and you're doing it using a different method, like I'm really passionate about this method because I've seen the success that I've had, but that doesn't mean that you can't do it another way. Like there's absolutely, there's a lot of ways to skin the cat here. And I've had a hard time finding a better one than this. And so, um, I think if you do it differently, man, I would love to chat. At the end of the day, like, please, if this is on YouTube, leave a comment. If not, shoot us a message and be like, look, this is how I do it, and it works really well. I'd love to hear it because this is such an interesting topic to me, as I'm sure it is to you, Michael. Like, I I don't want to be blind to the fact that like there are really successful companies running on a different method and that they're out there. I just want to understand it. And this is the only one that's really been able, this method is the only method I've had that has been able to um, consistently, effectively price jobs. So that's my experience. That's what I can speak to. And I think, it's important to make the distinction that it's not the only way. But um, with that said, I have one kind of devil's advocate question for you too,
Okay.
Michael, and that's that um, a lot of there's a lot of discussion about hourly rate out there that I've seen.
Okay.
So how could you possibly know your hourly rate?
I'm like, how could you not know your hourly rate? All right, so how could you know your hourly rate? Because there's too many variables, or what's the like? Help me understand
Uh,
where did somebody be coming
yeah,
from.
because like, is it reflective of your area? Is it
Mm,
reflective of like
yeah,
break it down a little bit here? Like why? Because
it is. Yep,
yeah.
I got you. So okay, so there's two or three parts to production rate estimating, depending on how you want to do materials. So at Textbook, we do materials as a separate piece. You guys do materials as part of your hourly rate.
That's been my method. Yes.
At that, it's where it's small difference. Doesn't matter, right? We
Mhm.
could easily do the same thing, just like you could easily pull out your materials. It's the same. We're very much the same. So really, what we're coming down to is how many hours, how much per hour, and does that how much per hour include the materials, or do I need to add that in on top? That's
Mhm.
it. That's what we're both talking about. And so really, we've talked a lot about how do we come up with the hours, and now we're trying to figure out how much do we charge per hour. And you asked, is it one way you might think of that is it based on the market and things like that? I think so. I would say yes, it is based on the market, but not in the way most people think. It's not based on, well, how much do my competitors charge? Therefore, I'm going to charge more or less. I don't care. At the end of the day, like, I don't care what my competitors charge, because I want to run the type of business that I want to run. I want to give our employees full-time benefits. I want them to drive decently nice vehicles, not like a rust bucket falling apart thing. I want our staff to have an okay, decent office. Like, this place is not the Taj Mahal, but it's like, I like coming here to work every day. Whatever. It's a decent place, and it costs decent money to rent, and all of those things, right? I like to have like a decent cup of coffee, so we have like a okay coffee. It costs a couple bucks here in the office, right? And so it's like, what I'm going to figure out is, what are all of those things cost, and then from that, I'm going to figure out, how much do I need to charge to be able to afford those things. I'm not going to go out to my competitors and say, well, if you guys charge $40 an hour, I'm going to charge $30, and then I'm going to try to figure out how the heck to afford a business after that, right? Because then that's where you end up with like a business that sucks to run. It's like, no, I know we got to spend money on marketing and benefits, but let's go back to that market. The reason the market matters is because it's the labor market, and that's the biggest part of this cost. How much does it cost to hire the good quality labor that, the good quality team members that we need, that I want to work with, that I'm going to be proud to send into somebody's home, and all of those things. And so in some markets, that might be $20 an hour. And in other markets, that might be 30. Just like, if you want to come to Cleveland, if you go buy a 2,000 square foot house in Cleveland, it doesn't cost the same as it does in San Francisco. We all know that. And it's for that reason, the cost of labor in San Francisco is higher than it is in the cost of Cleveland. And so the market matters, but not in the sense of like, well, how much do my competitors charge? And so therefore I'm just going to adjust based on that. Because the reality is, they have no idea what they're doing. They don't know how to charge. They're not making money. If I could just say that one more time for everybody, and for the one person that might be actually listening, stop looking at your competitors to see what you should charge. They're not making any money. Don't copy off of them.
I'll add to that just a little bit, and that's that, I think the one question we get a lot, especially kind of being on the software side of things, is, how much is an hour? How do I get my hourly rate? And we do have videos on that too, so there's some help out there. But the initial thing is that it's complicated. Like, it feels overwhelming, and like, to go through all of your business costs and try to break that down into an hourly rate feels overwhelming, and it feels like a barrier because it's math. I think a lot of people are just like, oh, math, oh my goodness, my head's spinning. Gotta get my financial statements. Like, that's an F word in some people's lives. Like it's like, how do I break all this down? Like, thanks guys. And so I think a lot of people has hesitation about, okay, great. Like, I've got some production rates, but how do I figure my time? And what's interesting is, I think we've talked about this before, just like, there's some kind of general rules of thumb you can use to figure out really quickly if you're charging even remotely the right amount of money per hour. Mm-hmm. Like, you can probably go to your accountant or whoever does your books and say, look, take all my costs and divide it by all the hours that our employees worked, our team worked, and tell me how much each one of those hours cost. Because that is the more accurate way to do it. It's not really forward thinking, but you can see the past. But we've talked about this before, that like, if you're looking at just simply a quick evaluation, what's the average cost of labor for most painting contractors, percentage-wise of their revenue? What would you say?
So without burden, about a third. I would say a third. If you're, again, for the sake of simplicity, and like, somebody's gonna say it's 35% and whatever. Yeah. Fine. I'm not disagreeing, but down, and this isn't the way that you again, to your question of like, is this the most accurate, best way to calculate your price? No. Is this a really back of the napkin way to do it? Yeah, I would say about a third.
About a third, yeah. Maybe with burden, you're talking about like 40%.
40.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and so you can reverse engineer pretty quickly off that number, because you're like, okay, add up just take the staff you have. What do you pay them per hour? Add all that up, divide that by the number of staff. That's your average hourly wage, assuming they all work full time. That's just
simple.
All working. That's what you're paying per hour.
Yep.
And in what you're saying is, if you keep burden out of that, then you just multiply that by 3, and just see if you're roughly charging 3 times what that average hourly wage is. And so, to me, that argument has always been, to me, it's been like just a misunderstanding of how the business runs, that might be driven from not understanding the percentages, which aren't really wildly available, right? Like what the percentages of a successful painting company look like. But it also could be driven from the fact that, like, yeah, financial statements are a little bit intimidating, math is intimidating. But let's go back to that basic principle. If you do that for your business today, are you charging roughly 3 times your average hourly wage?
Or more. But yes,
or more. Yeah, correct. Or more. Because if you are, great. If not, seriously consider raising your rate.
Yeah, just that simple.
Right? It's that simple. The other argument here too, people say, is like, well, what's my time worth? Like, if I'm working, what do I charge?
Sure.
Well, you just got to look at what it's going to cost to replace you. Really.
A lot.
So is that a lot? Yeah.
Seriously though, for most painting company owners, like, they're their best, especially if they're still out working on jobs, which is fine. You're probably better than somebody that you could hire, right? And so you need to account for that in a way that's, reality.
Yeah.
You couldn't replace yourself with a $20 an hour person.
No. Now, let's reverse this back into like a production rate type scenario. The reason why people get paid more is because they do things faster. They achieve the quality faster, right?
That can be one of the reasons. I don't know that that's the only reason.
I guess if we're talking about, okay, what would be another reason?
So I would say, like, what's the other value that they might be providing? So if they're managing more like a team,
totally.
Right? So they might not be the fastest painter on the team, but they're a good manager and they're able to do that, or they provide good customer service, and things like that. I would also think, like, what are the things that maybe they're taking away from the owner having to do, right? So maybe they're capable of ordering materials, or picking up the materials, or getting the final payments from the customers. Those are great. Then as the owner, maybe I don't have to go do that, so I can go spend that time doing another bid and selling more work.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, because you're absolutely right. I was more so thinking of like, it's purely the painting side of things, because this argument also exists. Like, what are you basing the hours on? Like, what's the time based on? Is it based on the fastest person, the slowest person? Like, who is this? And usually, it's the average. Like, it's kind of a time that's like comfortable in order to do it. And so if somebody can work faster, you're able to pay them more. And if they work slower, you kind of pay them less. And so that's been the kind of way that we've thought about it over the years. If you look at kind of the owner, going back to the initial kind of hesitation, it's like, well, if you're now taking yourself into more of a managerial role, is that overhead? Is that something else versus production? That's where we need to kind of think about our wages. That's where it's important. All right. Well, guys, thanks for tuning in. This has been the Price Sell Paint podcast. We thank you for your time. We hope this was valuable. If you find this was helpful, feel free to subscribe, give us a thumbs up. If you have any issues with what we said, by all means, leave some comments below. We'd love to hear from you. We are very open-minded, very interested to learn at all times. And so feel free to leave that below in the comments or send us a note. Thank you again for your time. We look forward to chatting with you next time. And here's to some happy estimating.
Cheers.